The day I walked away from Harold Bennett wasn't just the day I quit my job. It was the day I reclaimed my dignity. I still remember the exact moment when everything changed. The conference room was filled with executives in tailored suits, the air thick with cologne and perfume that couldn't quite mask the scent of ambition. 20 pairs of eyes watched as Harold's manicured hand slammed onto the polished oak table, making the water glasses tremble. "Natalie," he said, his voice dripping with that familiar condescension, "you'll handle the Christmas dinner for our investors next week. 25 guests, turkey, sides, dessert, the whole spread." My fingers tightened around my portfolio as I processed his words. I wasn't the catering coordinator. I was his senior project manager who'd saved 3 major accounts that year alone. "I'm not following," I said, hoping I'd misunderstood. Harold's smile widened, revealing teeth too perfect to be real. "Don't look so confused. You're staff, aren't you? Be grateful I trust you to do something useful." The executives laughed nervously, unsure if this was a joke. It wasn't. I knew that look in Harold's eyes, the one that said I should remember my place. For 5 years, I'd worked overtime, sacrificed weekends, and fixed his mistakes while he took the credit. 5 years of just be patient and your time will come. 5 years of being introduced as just the assistant, despite my title. But that day, standing in that conference room, something inside me finally broke free. What Harold Bennett didn't know was that my silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. Because instead of serving 25 executives on Christmas Eve, I booked a one-way ticket to Miami, packed my bags, and smiled, knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't serving justice, it's serving yourself. This is the story of how I left an empty table and found myself. I used to believe that hard work would speak for itself, that if I just put in enough hours, produced enough results, and smiled through enough indignities, eventually, I'd get the recognition I deserved. That was before I understood how men like Harold Bennett operated. I joined Bennett Capital at 24, fresh out of business school with a master's degree and enough ambition to power a small city. Back then, Dallas seemed like the perfect place to build a career in. Finance, big enough to offer opportunities, small enough that reputation mattered. Bennett Capital was mid-sized but growing, and I was thrilled when they offered me a position as a junior project manager. "You'll report directly to me," Harold had said during my interview, leaning back in his leather chair. He was in his early 40s then, with salt and pepper hair that looked deliberately styled to convey experience. "I need someone sharp, someone who can keep up. Are you that person, Natalie?" "Absolutely," I'd answered without hesitation. For the first year, I thought I'd found my perfect mentor. Harold was demanding but seemed to appreciate my dedication. I'd arrive before him and leave after him. I'd anticipate problems before they materialized. I'd prepare presentations so thorough that clients would comment on their quality. "That's my Natalie," Harold would say, squeezing my shoulder. "Always prepared. His Natalie." I didn't notice how possessive it sounded at first. I was just happy to be valued. The shift happened gradually. First, it was small things. Harold taking credit for my market analysis during a board meeting, or introducing me to clients as my assistant, rather, than our project manager. When I gently corrected him, he'd laugh it off. "Titles aren't important, Nat. Results are what matter." By year 3, I'd been passed over for promotion twice, despite bringing in 4 major clients. Each time, Harold had a reason. "The timing isn't right," or "let's revisit this after the Anderson account." My colleague Ashley Collins noticed before I did. We were the same age, both hired around the same time, but she worked in marketing while I was directly under Harold's thumb. "He's never going to promote you," she said one night as we shared takeout in my office. It was past 9, and I was finalizing a presentation Harold would deliver the next day. "You know that, right?" "He will when I prove myself," I insisted. Ashley put down her chopsticks. "Nat, you've been proving yourself for 3 years. At what point does it become enough?" I didn't have an answer, but I wasn't ready to admit she was right. Instead, I changed the subject and worked until midnight perfecting a presentation that Harold would claim as his own work. By year 4, the pattern was undeniable. Harold would assign me the most challenging projects, and I'd deliver exceptional results. He'd take the credit, receive the bonuses, and throw me the occasional "good job, Nat," like scraps from the table. When I suggested implementing a team management software that would save the company thousands, he dismissed it. 3 months later, he presented the exact same idea to the board as his own innovative solution. That evening, I found Ashley waiting by my car in the parking garage. "Drinks," she said. No excuses. I'm driving. At a quiet bar downtown, after 2 glasses of wine, I finally admitted what she'd been telling me for years. He's never going to see me as an equal, is he? Ashley took a sip of her martini. Men like Harold don't want equals. They want people they can use. And honey, you've made yourself very, very useful. So what am I supposed to do? Quit? In this economy? She shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe you make yourself a little less useful until he realizes your value. I considered her words on the ride home. Make myself less useful? That went against everything I'd been taught about professional success. Against everything I believed about myself. But she'd planted a seed. One that would take root in ways neither of us could have anticipated. By year 5, this year, I was running major accounts independently. Harold had become increasingly absent, taking extended golf trips with clients while I managed the actual work. I dealt with the fallout when his promises exceeded what we could deliver, smoothed ruffled feathers when he missed deadlines, and built relationships with clients who increasingly preferred dealing with me directly. Why do you put up with him? The CFO of Meridian Investments asked me after a particularly successful presentation. Harold had been a no-show, claiming food poisoning when we all knew he was at a golf tournament. Bennett Capital has been good to me, I said diplomatically. The CFO handed me his card. Well, when you're ready for somewhere that will be even better to you, call me. I kept that card in my wallet, occasionally taking it out just to remind myself that I had options, that I wasn't trapped, that perhaps there was a world beyond Harold Bennett where my work would be recognized. And then came December, and the Christmas Eve dinner request that wasn't a request at all, but a command disguised as an opportunity to prove my loyalty. What Harold didn't realize was that my loyalty had worn as thin as the excuses he made for my missing promotions. And what I didn't realize was that his humiliating order would be the final push I needed to break free. The week following Harold's announcement about the Christmas dinner was surreal. While I maintained a facade of compliance at the office, beneath the surface, my mind was racing with possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider before. So, you're really going to cook Christmas dinner for 25 executives? Ashley asked, perching on the edge of my desk. Her eyebrows arched with skepticism. That's what Harold expects, I replied, carefully neutral. She studied my face. But it's not what you're planning. I smiled thinly and changed the subject, asking about her holiday plans. Ashley knew me too. Well, if I shared what I was considering, she might try to talk me out of it. Or worse, she might encourage me, and I wasn't sure which possibility scared me more. That evening, I stayed late at the office, a normal occurrence that no one would question. Once the building had emptied, I methodically went through my files, backing up everything that demonstrated my contributions to the company. Every email where Harold had claimed my ideas as his own. Every presentation I'd created that he'd presented. Every contract I'd saved that he'd nearly tanked. I compiled it all into a secure folder and sent it to my personal email. It wasn't revenge I was planning. It was insurance. The next morning, Harold stopped by my desk, leaning over with that proprietary smile he wore whenever he was about to add to my workload. Nat, I forgot to mention, make sure there's a vegetarian option at the dinner. The wife of the Hartman Group CEO doesn't eat meat. Oh, and Peters is allergic to shellfish. He tapped my desk twice, as if confirming an order. You've got this. Of course, I replied, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. Anything else I should know? He paused, seeming almost surprised that I wasn't protesting. Just make it impressive. These people expect the best, and so do I. As he walked away, I opened my bottom drawer where I kept my personal items. Among them was the business card from Meridian's CFO. I'd been carrying it for months, telling myself it was just good networking. Now I picked up my phone and dialed the number. Robert Klein. Speaking, came the brisk answer. Mr. Klein, this is Natalie Harper from Bennett Capital. I kept my voice low, glancing toward Harold's office. You mentioned I should call if I was ever ready for a change. There was a pause, then a warm chuckle. Natalie, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Let's talk. We arranged to meet for coffee the following morning, before work hours. It wasn't an interview, not officially, but we both knew what it was. An escape route, a possibility. When I arrived at the cafe at 6:30 a.m., Robert was already there, reviewing documents at a corner table. He stood as I approached, extending his hand with genuine warmth. Natalie, it's good to see you outside of Bennett's shadow. For the next hour, we discussed Meridian's expansion into the Miami market. They needed someone to head their project management division, someone with experience handling difficult clients and complex situations. Someone like you, Robert said, sliding a folder across the table. This is what we're prepared to offer. Take your time to consider it. I opened the folder and nearly choked on my coffee. The salary was double what I was making at Bennett. The position was director, not manager, and the location was Miami, as far from Dallas and Harold Bennett as I could reasonably get. This is very generous, I managed. Robert's eyes crinkled at the corners. It's what you're worth, Natalie. Some people recognize talent when they see it. I promised to give him my answer within the week. As I walked to my car, the folder tucked securely in my bag, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had options. I had value. I had power that Harold had made me forget I possessed. Back at the office, Harold was in rare form, strutting around and boasting about his Christmas Eve dinner to anyone who would listen. We're going to impress the hell out of these investors, he announced in the break room, where I was filling my coffee mug. Natalie's handling everything. She's the only one I trust with something this important. I felt eyes turn toward me, some sympathetic, others curious to see how I'd respond. I simply smiled and raised my mug in acknowledgement before returning to my desk. Later, Ashley cornered me in the copy room. He's going around telling everyone you volunteered for this dinner thing, she said, her voice low but indignant. Said it was your idea to showcase your other talents. I felt my cheeks flush with anger. Of course he is. Nat, you have to stand up to him. This isn't just about dinner, it's about dignity. I looked at my friend, her face flushed with righteous anger on my behalf, and felt a wave of affection. You're right, but I need to handle this my way. That evening, I sat at my dining table, the Meridian offer on one side, my laptop open to flight searches on the other, Miami in December, warm beaches instead of a cold conference room, respect instead of exploitation. The decision wasn't just about a job or a dinner. It was about who I was becoming by staying versus who I could be by leaving. My phone buzzed with a text from Harold. Don't forget to email me the menu by tomorrow. Need to approve before you start shopping. I stared at the message, then at the flight options on my screen. A one-way ticket to Miami on December 23rd, the day before the dinner, was still available. First class even. I could afford it with the signing bonus Meridian was offering. My finger hovered over the purchase button. Was I really considering this? Walking away without notice? Leaving an empty table where Harold Chum expected a feast? It went against everything I'd been taught about professionalism, about responsibility, about being the bigger person. But then I thought about 5 years of diminishment, of stolen credit, of be grateful, and you're just staff. I thought about Christmas Eve, a time I should be spending with family, being commandeered for me to serve people who saw me as nothing more than an extension of Harold's will. I pressed purchase. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A weight lifting, a chain breaking. I wasn't just booking a flight. I was choosing myself for the first time in years. I closed my laptop and picked up my phone, typing a response to Harold. Menu will be in your inbox tomorrow morning. It's going to be unforgettable. And it would be, just not in the way he expected. The 2 weeks leading up to Christmas Eve unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. During the day, I played the role Harold expected, the dutiful employee, seemingly planning his grand dinner while managing my regular workload. I sent him menu options, discussed wine pairings, and even toured the conference room to plan the year A table settings. The centerpieces should be elegant but not obstructive, I told the receptionist who was helping me measure the table. We want conversation to flow easily. Harold, meanwhile, couldn't stop boasting about his event. In meetings, he'd casually mention, after you taste Natalie's Christmas dinner, you'll understand why I keep her around. The thinly veiled condescension made my colleagues shift uncomfortably in their seats, but no one contradicted him. Not even me. At night, however, I was preparing for a very different future. I researched apartments in Miami, spoke with Robert Klein about transition timelines, and carefully packed the essentials I'd take with me. Everything else could be shipped later or replaced. I'd decided to rent a furnished apartment in Brickell, Miami's financial district. The lease was month to month, giving me flexibility while I settled into my new role. The building had a pool, a gym, and a stunning view of Biscayne Bay. It was more than I'd ever allowed myself while working under Harold's thumb. 4 days before Christmas Eve, Robert called to confirm my start date. January 2nd work for you? He asked. Give you some time to settle in after the holidays. Perfect, I replied, feeling a rush of excitement. I'm looking forward to the new year. So are we, Natalie. The team's excited to meet you. The team. Not my team or the people who work for me. Just the team. The subtle difference spoke volumes. 3 days before Christmas Eve, Harold called me into his office. His jacket was slung over his chair, and he'd rolled up his sleeves, a pose he adopted when he wanted to appear busy. "Sit down, Nat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Let's talk about the dinner." I perched on the edge of the seat, portfolio in hand. "What would you like to know? Everything set? The catering, the serving staff, the decorations?" I nodded, lying with a smile. "All confirmed." He leaned back, satisfaction spreading across his face. "Good. This dinner could make or break some big deals for us. The Prescott Group is on the fence about a 7-figure investment. Hartman's considering doubling their portfolio with us." He pointed a finger at me. "Don't mess this up." "I wouldn't dream of it," I replied, meeting his gaze. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, perhaps a recognition of the steel in my voice. But it passed quickly, replaced by his usual dismissive confidence. "I knew I could count on you," he said, already turning his attention to his computer screen. That's all. I was being dismissed, just like always. As I stood to leave, he added without looking up, "Oh, and wear something nice. Professional but festive. You'll be serving important people." My hand tightened on the doorknob. Of course, Harold. That evening, Ashley invited me for dinner at her apartment. She'd been watching me carefully all week, clearly sensing something was different. When I arrived, she had wine open and Thai food spread across her coffee table. "Spill it," she said as soon as I sat down. "You're up to something." I considered deflecting again, but realized I needed at least one person to know the truth, someone who could explain after I was gone. "I'm leaving," I said simply, accepting the glass of wine she handed me. Her eyes widened. "Leaving the company? Leaving Dallas?" I took a deep breath. "I've accepted a position with Meridian in Miami. Director level, double the salary." Ashley's mouth fell open, then closed, then opened again. Finally, she let out a whoop and rushed to hug me. "Oh my God, Nat! That's amazing! When do you start? When did this happen? Wait!" She pulled back suddenly. "What about the dinner?" I took a long sip of wine. "That's the thing. I'm flying to Miami on the 23rd. She stared at me, realization dawning slowly. "The day before Christmas Eve. The day before Harold's big dinner." I nodded. "So there will be no dinner." She said not a question but a statement. "There will be an empty table," I confirmed. "And 25 very disappointed executives." Ashley sat back, her expression a mixture of shock and awe. "Holy shit, Nat. That's nuclear. Harold will completely lose it." I know. And I did know. I'd played out the scenario in my mind 100 times. The initial confusion, the frantic calls to my cell phone, the dawning realization that I wasn't coming, that there was no dinner, that his reputation was crumbling in real time in front of the very people he was desperate to impress. "He'll try to destroy you professionally," Ashley warned. "You know that, right?" I nodded again. "That's why I've been documenting everything for the past 5 years. Every idea he stole, every client I saved, every time he took credit for my work." I met her eyes steadily. "I'm not doing this on impulse, Ash. I've thought it through." She studied me for a long moment, then raised her glass. 2 empty tables and new beginnings. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the tension in my shoulders release. Someone knew. Someone understood. I wasn't alone in this quiet rebellion. The next day, at work, my second to last day, though no one but Ashley knew it, Harold stopped by my desk mid-morning. "I've invited 2 more people to the dinner," he announced. "The Whitaker brothers. Old money, new interest in our energy portfolio." I made a show of checking my notes. "So that's 27 total now?" 27, he confirmed. "Can you handle it?" The condescension in his tone made my decision feel even more right. "Absolutely," I assured him. 2 more won't be a problem." He patted my shoulder, a gesture that once made me feel valued but now felt patronizing. "That's my girl." As he walked away, I opened my email to find a confirmation for my apartment in Miami and my new employee paperwork from Meridian. I filled out the forms methodically, officially cementing my future, while Harold continued to believe I was securing his. My last day at Bennett Capital was surreal. I arrived early to clear out my personal items. Not that there were many. A photo of my parents, a small plant Ashley had given me, a few books. Everything fit into a single tote bag. I left my keycard and company phone on my desk with a simple note. I quit. Natalie Harper. No explanation. No 2 weeks notice. No forwarding address. Just 3 words that represented my final act of self-respect. As I walked through the parking garage for the last time, I passed Harold's reserved space. His BMW gleamed under the fluorescent lights, the personalized license plate reading Ben Boss, a final reminder of his inflated ego. I didn't key his car or leave a note on the windshield. I didn't need petty gestures of revenge. The empty table waiting for him tomorrow evening would speak volumes more than any damage I could inflict. Instead, I drove to the airport with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. My flight to Miami wasn't until the next morning, but I'd booked a hotel near the airport to ensure nothing would prevent my departure. That evening, alone in my hotel room, I turned off my phone after sending one final text to Ashley. It's done. I'll call you when I land tomorrow. As I placed the phone in the drawer of the bedside table, I realized my hands were steady. No anxiety. No second thoughts. Just certainty that I was finally doing what I should have done years ago, choosing myself over someone who had never chosen me. Tomorrow, Harold Bennett would understand the true cost of underestimating my worth, and I would be too far away to hear the crash. Christmas Eve dawned bright and cold in Dallas, but I was already 400 miles away, watching palm trees sway outside the window of my Miami-bound plane. The morning light cast a golden glow across the clouds below us, nature's own celebratory decoration for my personal Independence Day. First time in Miami? The woman next to me asked as the flight attendant served breakfast. First time living there, I replied, surprising myself with how right the words felt. I'm starting over. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Best time to start over is Christmas. Everything feels possible. I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. While others celebrated rebirth through tradition, I was embracing it through transformation. My phone had been off since the previous night, a deliberate choice to disconnect from the chaos I knew would be unfolding in Dallas. Part of me was curious about Harold's reaction when he discovered my empty desk and resignation note, but a greater part was savoring the peace of being unreachable. As the plane began its descent into Miami International, I allowed myself one moment of visualization. Harold entering the conference room at precisely 6 p.m., expecting to find an elegant dinner setup. Instead, he'd find bare tables, no food, no staff, just empty chairs awaiting important guests who would arrive any minute. The panic would set in quickly, followed by anger, then desperation as he tried to salvage the situation. We're beginning our final descent into Miami, the captain announced over the intercom. Local time is 11:23 a.m., and the temperature is a beautiful 78 degrees. 78 degrees on Christmas Eve, a world away from Dallas's frigid winter. A fresh start in more ways than one. After landing, I collected my luggage and hailed a taxi to my new apartment building. The leasing office had agreed to let me check in early as a Christmas courtesy, and the key was waiting for me when I arrived. Welcome to Brickell Heights, Ms. Harper, the concierge said, handing me an envelope with my key card. Your apartment is ready. Anything you need, just let us know. The apartment was exactly as advertised. Sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Sunlight streamed in, reflecting off the water and creating patterns on the polished hardwood floors. It was twice the size of my place in Dallas for only slightly more rent. I set down my bags and walked to the window, taking in the view of boats cutting white paths through the blue water below. In the distance, I could see the beaches of Key Biscayne. This was my new reality, a place where I was valued, where my title matched my responsibilities, where the salary reflected my worth. After unpacking the essentials, I decided to explore my new neighborhood. The streets were bustling with last-minute Christmas shoppers and tourists in festive attire. Palm trees wrapped in twinkling lights lined the sidewalks, and restaurants had set up outdoor seating areas adorned with poinsettias. I found a small cafe with a patio overlooking the water and ordered lunch. As I waited for my food, I finally turned on my phone. The screen immediately lit up with notifications, 17 missed calls from Harold, 23 text messages, and 34 emails. I took a deep breath and began with the texts. 8:17 a.m. Where are you? Your desk is empty. 8:34 a.m. Call me immediately. 9:02 a.m. Is this some kind of joke? Call me. 9:45 a.m. Whatever you think you're making a huge mistake. 10:28 a.m. I need confirmation on the dinner arrangements now. The messages grew increasingly desperate as the morning progressed. culminating in a final text sent just 20 minutes ago. You've made the biggest mistake of your career. I'll make sure you never work in finance again. Call me now. I deleted them all without responding. Next, I checked my emails, most from Harold, some from confused colleagues wondering where I was, one from Ashley with the subject line, "The shit has hit the fan." I opened Ashley's email first. "Nat, Harold is losing it. He came in this morning all smug, then found your note and practically turned purple. He's been storming around the office demanding everyone call you as if we have some secret way to reach you that he doesn't. He called the catering company you supposedly booked. They had no record of any order. Same with the rental company for the tables and chairs. He's figuring out that there never was a plan for this dinner. The best part? The board called an emergency meeting about the situation. Harold tried to paint you as unstable and irresponsible. But Davidson, the one board member who always liked you, asked some pointed questions about why a senior project manager was arranging catering in the first place. I've never seen Harold speechless before. It was glorious. Anyway, I hope you're somewhere amazing, drinking something delicious. You deserve it. Call me when you can. I want all the details. Ash." I couldn't help but smile as I sipped my iced tea. The board was asking questions. That was unexpected, but welcome. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Whatever Harold had to say, I'd heard enough of his voice to last a lifetime. Instead, I sent a quick text to Ashley. "Landed safely. Miami is beautiful. We'll call tomorrow. Merry Christmas." Then I turned off my notifications, put my phone in my purse, and decided to be present in my new life. The waiter brought my food, a fresh Cobb salad with avocado and grilled shrimp, and I ate while watching boats sail past, occasionally catching snippets of cheerful conversations from nearby tables. Families planning their Christmas Eve celebrations, couples discussing New Year's resolutions, friends laughing over shared memories. By the time I returned to my apartment, it was nearly 4 p.m. In Dallas, Harold would be making final preparations for the dinner, perhaps still clinging to the hope that I'd appear at the last minute to save him. The thought brought not satisfaction, but a sense of closure. This wasn't about hurting Harold. It was about helping myself. I unpacked the rest of my belongings, arranged the few personal items I'd brought to make the space feel more like home, and opened the balcony door to let in the warm breeze. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. At exactly 6 p.m., the time the dinner was scheduled to begin in Dallas, I poured myself a glass of champagne and stepped onto the balcony. Far away, Harold would be facing 27 confused and hungry executives. His reputation would be crumbling in real time. His career might never recover. I raised my glass to the sunset. To empty tables and new beginnings, I echoed Ashley's toast from days earlier. As darkness fell over Miami, I felt no guilt, no regret, only the profound relief of having finally chosen myself. Whatever happened next in Dallas was no longer my concern. My story was just beginning, and for the first time in years, I was the one writing it. Christmas, it's ho. Morning in Miami was surreal. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, the sound of distant waves replacing the usual traffic noise of downtown Dallas. For a moment, I lay still, orienting myself in this new reality I'd created. My phone, which I'd left on overnight, showed dozens of new notifications. Most were from unknown numbers, likely colleagues at Bennett Capital trying to reach me on behalf of Harold. I ignored those. 3 were from Ashley, and 1 was from Robert Klein, welcoming me to Miami. I responded to Robert first, thanking him and confirming our meeting on January 2nd. Then I called Ashley. "Merry Christmas," I said when she answered. "Holy shit, Nat." Her voice was a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "You actually did it. You really did it." "I really did," I confirmed, walking to the balcony with my coffee. The view of Biscayne Bay glittered in the morning sun. "How bad was it?" Ashley let out a laugh that bordered on maniacal. "Bad doesn't begin to cover it. Catastrophic. Biblical. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, except the car was Harold's career and everyone brought popcorn." "Tell me everything," I said, settling into a chair. So the investors started arriving around 6. Harold had the conference room set up with the good china and crystal, stuff from the executive dining room, but obviously no food. At first, he kept checking his watch and making excuses about the catering being stuck in traffic. I could picture it perfectly. Harold's forced smile growing increasingly strained, the confused glances between guests, the awkward small talk as minutes ticked by. By 6:30, people were getting restless. The Prescott guys started making jokes about ordering pizza. Harold tried calling you again. Must have been the 20th time. And then announced that there was a situation with the catering staff. Did he blame me directly? I asked. Not at first. He was trying to save face. But then Peterson from the Hartman group asked if they should just go to a restaurant, and Harold, well, he kind of lost it. I took a sip of coffee. Define lost it. He slammed his hand on the table and said you'd sabotage the dinner deliberately. Called you unprofessional, ungrateful, unstable. Said he'd given you opportunities no one else would, and this was how you repaid his mentorship. I felt a flicker of anger at his lies, but it was quickly replaced by satisfaction. Harold was showing his true colors to the very people he'd been trying to impress. How did they react? That's the best part. Ashley's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Davidson, from the board, was there with the Whitaker brothers. He asked Harold why a senior project manager was handling catering in the first place. Said it seemed like an unusual responsibility for someone with your qualifications. I smiled at that. Davidson had always seen through Harold's management style but rarely intervened directly. Harold tried to backpedal, saying you'd volunteered because you enjoyed that kind of thing. But then Melissa from HR spoke up. I don't know why she was even there, and mentioned that requiring non-administrative staff to perform personal services could potentially create liability issues for the company. She said that? In front of everyone? I was genuinely surprised. Melissa had always seemed too timid to challenge Harold. Yep, it was like watching dominoes fall. Once she spoke up, others started asking questions. Why wasn't there a professional caterer? Why would such an important event be left to one person with no support staff? Where was the backup plan? I leaned back in my chair, absorbing this unexpected development. I'd anticipated embarrassment for Harold, but not a full-scale questioning of his leadership. What happened then? They ended up ordering from that steakhouse down the street, waited nearly 2 hours for the food. Half the investors left before it arrived. The Prescott deal is definitely dead. Their CFO was one of the first to walk out. And this morning, Davidson called an emergency board meeting for the 26th. I hadn't expected the fallout to be quite so immediate or severe. Part of me felt a twinge of regret, not for Harold, but for colleagues like Ashley who would have to deal with the aftermath. I'm sorry if this makes things difficult. For you? I said. Ashley scoffed. Are you kidding? This is the most entertainment we've had in years. Besides, Harold's the one who should be apologizing, not you. We talked a while longer about her Christmas plans and my first impressions of Miami. As we were about to hang up, she added, Oh, and one more thing you should know. Harold's telling everyone he fired you for incompetence. Says he discovered you'd been falsifying reports and had no choice but to terminate you immediately. I should have expected this. Let him say what he wants. The truth will come out. It already is. I may have accidentally forwarded some emails to Davidson. The ones where Harold takes credit for your work. The ones where he makes inappropriate comments about your place in the company. Purely by accident, of course. Ashley Collins, you didn't. Merry Christmas, Nat. Consider it my gift to you and to workplace justice everywhere. After we hung up, I spent the morning exploring my new neighborhood, finding a small cafe for breakfast and a market to stock my refrigerator. The city had a relaxed holiday atmosphere. Families in the parks, couples strolling along the waterfront. The occasional Santa had atop a sunbather's head. Around noon, my phone rang with a Dallas area code I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification appeared. Ms. Harper, this is Thomas Davidson from the Bennett Capital Board of Directors. I'd appreciate a call back at your convenience. My direct number is... I saved the number, but didn't call back immediately. Whatever was happening at Bennett Capital wasn't my emergency anymore. I'd enjoy my Christmas first. That evening, I found a restaurant on the beach that was open for the holiday. I treated myself to a seafood dinner and a glass of wine, watching as the sun set over the water. At a nearby table, a family was celebrating. Grandparents, parents, children, all talking over each other, laughing, sharing food. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of missing out on life while working. Instead, I felt a sense of possibility. Next Christmas, perhaps I'd have built connections here. Perhaps I'd have friends to celebrate with. Or maybe I'd fly home to visit my parents in Chicago. As I walked back to my apartment along the moonlit beach, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't, recognize. Natalie, it's Robert Klein. Some of the team is getting together for drinks tomorrow evening to celebrate the holidays. We'd love for you to join us. Informal, just a chance to meet everyone before you start officially. Let me know. I smiled and typed back, "I'd love to. Thank you for the invitation." Back in my apartment, I finally called Thomas Davidson. "Ms. Harper, thank you for returning my call, especially on Christmas Day," he said, his voice carrying the precise cadence of old money and Ivy League education. "Please, call me Natalie. And it's no trouble. What can I do for you, Mr. Davidson?" "Thomas, please." He paused. "I imagine you've heard about the situation at the office last night." "I've heard some details," I acknowledged. "I won't waste your time. The board has serious concerns about Mr. Bennett's management practices that have come to light in the wake of your departure. We're conducting a review of several incidents, and your perspective would be valuable." I hadn't expected the board to move so quickly. "What specifically are you investigating?" "Allegations of credit appropriation, misrepresentation of work product, creating a hostile work environment, and misuse of company resources, among other things." His tone remained neutral, but I could hear the gravity behind his words. "I see. We'd appreciate your cooperation, but I understand if you'd prefer to leave this chapter behind you." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to wash my hands of Bennett Capital completely, but another part, the part that had endured 5 years of diminishment, wanted the truth to be known. "I'll help however I can," I said finally. "But I'm in Miami now, starting a new position after the new year. We can arrange a video call, or I can come to you if necessary. This is a priority for the board." We scheduled a call for December 27th, and as I hung up, I felt a sense of closure beginning to form. My departure hadn't just freed me. It had potentially exposed a pattern of behavior that affected others, too. That night, as I prepared for bed in my new home, I realized something important. In leaving that empty table, I hadn't just walked away from Harold Bennett. I'd walked toward myself, the self I'd almost forgotten during those years of trying to prove my worth to someone incapable of seeing it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new faces, new opportunities. But tonight, on this Christmas thousands of miles from where I'd expected to be, I was exactly where I needed to be. And for the first time in years, that was more than enough. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a blur of discovery. Each day I explored a different part of Miami, learning the rhythms of my new city, where locals ate breakfast, which parks were best for morning walks, which beaches weren't overrun with tourists. I was building a map of possibilities, each street and neighborhood representing a fresh start. On December 27th, I had my scheduled call with Thomas Davidson and 2 other Bennett Capital board members. For 3 hours, I walked them through my experience at the company, sharing documentation of Harold's pattern of behavior, the stolen ideas, the undermining comments, the inappropriate demands. "I want to be clear," I told them toward the end of the call. "I'm not seeking any compensation or pursuing legal action. I've moved on to a position where my skills are valued appropriately. My only interest is ensuring that others don't experience what I did." Davidson nodded solemnly. "We appreciate your candor. Natalie, rest assured we're taking this very seriously." That evening, I met several of my future Meridian colleagues for drinks at a rooftop bar overlooking the city. Robert Klein made the introductions, and I was immediately struck by how different the dynamic felt from Bennett Capital. "We've heard great things about you," said Elena Vega, the marketing director. "Robert says you saved the Anderson account single-handedly." "Not single-handedly," I demurred. "It was a team effort." "That's exactly why we wanted you," Robert chimed in. "You know how to build and lead teams." Harold Bennett never understood that, which was his loss and our gain. The conversation flowed easily as we discussed upcoming projects, office dynamics, and Miami's best-kept secrets. No one asked why I'd left Dallas so abruptly or mentioned the rumors that were surely circulating in financial circles. They treated me as a valuable addition to their team, not a curiosity or a scandal. As the night wound down, Elena linked her arm through mine as we waited for our respective ride shares. "Some of us are having a New Year's Eve party at my place," she said. "Nothing fancy, just good food, good drinks, and, starting the year with good people. You should come." The invitation touched me more than she could know. "I'd love to. Thank you." On December 29th, Ashley called with an update from Dallas. "The board suspended Harold pending investigation," she announced without preamble. "He cleared out his office yesterday. You should have seen his face, Nat. Like someone told him gravity was optional." "Suspended? Not fired?" "Legal procedures," she explained. But Davidson pulled me aside and said it's extremely unlikely. Harold will be returning in any capacity. I processed this information, surprised by my lack of vindictive satisfaction. How are things there otherwise? Weird, good weird, but weird. People are talking more openly, pointing out problems that everyone pretended not to see before. It's like your leaving broke some spell of silence. That night, I received an email from Davidson confirming what Ashley had told me. The board had suspended Harold and was conducting a comprehensive review of management practices. They were also reaching out to former employees who'd left under similar circumstances, uncovering a pattern that spanned years. While we regret the circumstances that led to your departure, Davidson wrote, we are grateful for your courage in bringing these issues to light. Should you ever wish to return to Bennett Capital, you would be welcomed with appropriate recognition of your skills and contributions. I appreciated the gesture but knew I wouldn't be going back. Some doors were meant to stay closed once you walked through them. New Year's Eve arrived bright and clear. I spent the morning on the beach, watching families build sandcastles and couples stroll along the shoreline. In the afternoon, I bought a bottle of champagne and a new dress for Elena's party, a deep blue sheath that reminded me of the ocean view from my apartment. As I was getting ready, my phone lit up with a Dallas number I didn't recognize. Against my, better judgment, I answered. Natalie. Harold's voice, familiar and unwelcome, filled my ear. Don't hang up. I should have ended the call immediately, but curiosity got the better of me. What do you want, Harold? To understand what the hell you think you're doing. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. You disappeared without notice, sabotaged an important client dinner, and now you're feeding lies to the board? I didn't sabotage anything, I replied calmly. I quit. There's a difference. By leaving an empty table, by humiliating me in front of our biggest investors, that's how a professional behaves? I took a deep breath, refusing to be baited into anger. Was it professional to order your senior project manager to cook and serve dinner like household staff? Was it professional to take credit for my work for 5 years? Was it professional to block my promotions while exploiting my skills? I gave you opportunities. No, Harold. You gave me obligations. You took opportunities. There was a moment of silence then. The board is making a mistake. This vendetta of yours. It's not a vendetta. It's consequences. I kept my voice steady, determined not to let him affect me. For years, you treated me as less than I was. You diminished my contributions while benefiting from them. You created a workplace where respect was conditional on subservience. That's not, it is. And you know it is. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. Confident, composed, no longer the woman who accepted less than she deserved. I'm not angry anymore, Harold. I've moved on to somewhere my work is valued. I suggest you use this opportunity to reflect on why so many people were ready to believe the worst about your management style. You'll regret this, he said, his voice cold. Dallas is a small community. Word gets around. I laughed softly. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Goodbye, Harold. I ended the call and blocked his number, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. His threats held no power over me anymore. I had proof of my capabilities, a new position that recognized them, and a community beginning to form around me. Elena's New Year's Eve party was everything I needed. Warm, welcoming, filled with laughter and conversations that flowed as freely as the champagne. Her apartment overlooked the water, and at midnight, we watched fireworks bloom over the bay, their reflections dancing across the dark surface. To new beginnings, Robert toasted, raising his glass as the new year arrived. And to knowing your worth, Elena added, winking at me. As the celebration continued around me, I stepped onto Elena's balcony for a moment alone. The Miami skyline glittered like a constellation brought down to Earth, full of possibilities I was only beginning to discover. My phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. Happy New Year from snowy Dallas. You made the right choice. Proud of you. I smiled and typed back, Happy New Year. Thanks for everything. Visit soon? January 2nd arrived crisp and clear, my first official day at Meridian Investments. I arrived early, wearing a confidence that went beyond my carefully chosen outfit. Robert met me in the lobby, ready to introduce me to the team that was now mine to lead. Nervous? He asked as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. I considered the question, realizing with some surprise that I wasn't. No, I replied honestly. I'm ready. The doors opened to reveal a modern office space with views of the bay I'd come to love already. Staff. Members looked up from their desks, offering smiles and nods of welcome. Everyone, Robert announced, I'd like you to meet Natalie Harper, our new Director of Project Management. Director, not assistant, not just staff. a title that matched my abilities in a place where my contributions would be recognized. As I shook hands and learned names, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass. Walls of the conference room, shoulders back, smile genuine, eyes clear. I barely recognized myself. It wasn't just the new city or the new job that had transformed me. It was the knowledge that I'd finally stood up for my own value, even when it meant walking away from the familiar into the unknown. The empty table I'd left behind in Dallas wasn't just a statement to Harold Bennett. It was a promise to myself that I would never again settle for less than I deserved. And as I sat down at my new desk, in my new office, with my name on the door, I knew it was a promise I intended to keep. 6 months into my new life at Meridian Investments, Miami felt more like home than Dallas ever had. My apartment had transformed from a blank slate to a personal sanctuary, with artwork on the walls, plants thriving on the balcony, and a comfortable routine that balanced work and life in a way I'd never experienced at Bennett Capital. Spring had given way to summer, bringing humid heat that locals assured me was just getting started. I'd adapted to the rhythm of the city. Early mornings on the beach before the tourists arrived, late dinners at outdoor cafes where conversations flowed in a mix of English and Spanish, weekend explorations of neighborhoods I was slowly claiming as my own. At work, I'd built a team that operated on trust and collaboration. We'd successfully launched 3 major investment portfolios, earning accolades from clients who appreciated our transparency and results-oriented approach. Robert had become a valued mentor rather than a boss, offering guidance while respecting my expertise. The Morrison Group was impressed with yesterday's presentation, he mentioned during our weekly check-in. Said it was the most thorough market analysis they'd seen in years. I smiled, thinking of the junior analyst who'd contributed the innovative forecasting model. Jamie deserves most of the credit for that section. I'll make sure she knows her work was noticed. Robert nodded approvingly. That's why you're succeeding where Harold failed. You lift your team up instead of standing on their shoulders. The mention of Harold's name no longer triggered anxiety or anger. He'd become a distant figure, a cautionary tale rather than an active threat in my life. Still, I occasionally wondered about the aftermath of my departure. That evening, as if summoned by my thoughts, an email from Ashley appeared in my inbox. You won't believe what's happening here. Can we talk? It's not urgent, but it's definitely interesting. We arranged a video call for that weekend. When her face appeared on my screen, I was struck by how relaxed she looked, a stark contrast to the perpetually stressed expression she'd worn at Bennett Capital. You look fantastic, I greeted her. What's this news that couldn't wait? Ashley grinned, practically bouncing in her seat. First, how's Miami treating you? Still loving it? It's amazing, I confirmed. I should have moved years ago, but stop stalling. What's happening in Dallas? She took a dramatic breath. Bennett Capital is being restructured. The board finally completed their investigation, and it was worse than anyone imagined. Harold wasn't just stealing your ideas. He was manipulating financial reports, inflating his performance metrics, and skimming from the expense accounts. I sat back, genuinely surprised. Criminal activity? I never suspected that. No one did. He was careful. But once they started digging, she shook her head. It's like your leaving pulled a thread that unraveled the whole sweater. What's happening to the company? That's the interesting part. They're splitting into smaller divisions with more oversight. And here's the kicker. She paused for effect. They've offered me the position of marketing director for the Southwestern Division. Ashley, that's incredible, I exclaimed, genuinely thrilled for my friend. Are you taking it? I already did. Her smile was radiant. Double the salary, actual authority, and Davidson personally guaranteed that the new management structure prevents another Harold situation. You deserve it, I told her sincerely. No one worked harder or smarter than you. Well, except you, she countered. Which reminds me of the other news. Harold's gone completely, not just suspended, terminated with cause. He tried to sue for wrongful dismissal. But when the financial improprieties came to light, he dropped the case immediately. I absorbed this information, waiting for the satisfaction I'd once imagined would come with Harold's downfall. Instead, I felt something closer to closure, the final chapter of a story I was no longer invested in. Have you heard anything about where he ended up? I asked, more out of curiosity than concern. Ashley smirked. Last I heard, he's working for his brother-in-law's insurance company. Middle management? No direct reports. She raised her eyebrows meaningfully. Apparently, word did get around, just not the way he threatened it would. After we hung up, I took my evening walk along the waterfront, watching sailboats return to the harbor as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The news about Harold should have felt like vindication, but instead, it simply confirmed what I'd already learned. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful statement you can make. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find an email from Thomas Davidson in my inbox. The subject line read, "Opportunity for discussion." "Dear Natalie," it began, "Bennett Capital's restructuring is nearly complete, and we're entering a new chapter with valuable lessons learned from past mistakes. Your insights were instrumental in helping us identify systemic problems within our organization. I'll be in Miami next week for a conference and would welcome the opportunity to thank you in person. No agenda beyond appreciation, and perhaps a discussion of how both our firms might benefit from closer collaboration in the future." I showed the email to Robert during our morning meeting. "Davidson's well-respected," he commented after reading it, "and Bennett Capital still has a strong portfolio despite Harold's mismanagement. A strategic partnership could be beneficial for both companies." I nodded, considering the possibilities. "Would you join us for that meeting? I'd value your perspective." "Of course," he agreed readily. "Just because you left Bennett Capital doesn't mean we can't build bridges with the company itself, especially under new leadership." The following Thursday, I met Thomas Davidson for dinner at a waterfront restaurant. Robert joined us halfway through the meal, and the conversation flowed easily from personal updates to industry trends to potential areas of collaboration. "I want to be clear," Davidson said as dessert was served. "This isn't an attempt to lure you back to Bennett Capital, though we would certainly welcome that. It's about recognizing that talent should be nurtured rather than exploited, and partnerships should be based on mutual respect." "I appreciate that," I replied. "And while I'm very happy at Meridian, I see no reason why our companies can't work together on projects that benefit both our clients." By the end of the evening, we'd outlined a framework for a joint venture, a specialized investment portfolio focusing on sustainable energy that would leverage Meridian's innovative approach with Bennett Capital's established client base. As we said our goodbyes, Davidson handed me a small envelope. "A token of appreciation," he explained. "Not just from me, but from several clients who recognized your value long before the board did." Later that night, I opened the envelope to find handwritten notes from clients I'd worked with at Bennett Capital, the Prescott Group, Meridian Investments, before they became my employer, and others expressing their admiration for my professionalism and integrity. "Your departure revealed character on all sides," one note read. "We followed the talent." I pinned the notes to my bulletin board, a reminder that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, eventually leads to recognition in ways you might not anticipate. Summer turned to fall, and our joint venture with Bennett Capital exceeded expectations. The sustainable energy portfolio attracted new clients for both firms, creating a model of collaboration that industry publications highlighted as innovative. Ashley and I spoke regularly, sharing insights and occasionally laughing about the irony of working together again, albeit from different companies. One evening in late September, almost 9 months after I'd left that empty table in Dallas, I received a text message from a Dallas area code I didn't recognize. "Is this Natalie Harper?" "It's Michael Bennett, Harold's brother." I hesitated before responding. I'd never met Harold's family during my time at Bennett Capital. Why would his brother contact me now? "Yes, this is Natalie," I finally replied. "What can I do for you, Michael?" His response came quickly. "I know this is unexpected. I'm in Miami for a conference and heard you were here now. I'd like to meet briefly if you're willing. There's something I think you should know." Curiosity won over caution. We arranged to meet the following morning at a cafe near my office. Michael Bennett looked nothing like his brother. Where Harold had been all polished surfaces and calculated charm, Michael seemed genuine and understated. He was older, with gentle eyes that crinkled when he greeted me. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as we sat with our coffees. "I imagine my last name doesn't inspire much goodwill with you." "I try not to judge people by their relatives," I replied evenly. He smiled ruefully. "That's more generosity than my brother deserves." He took a sip of coffee before continuing. "I wanted to tell you that what you did, leaving that empty table, it changed more than just one company." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to elaborate. "Harold and I haven't been close for years," Michael explained. "He always took the shortcuts I couldn't condone. But family is family, so I kept my distance rather than confront him." He looked down at his hands. "When everything fell apart for him, he came to me for help. Not with humility, but with the same entitlement he'd always shown." "Did you help him?" I asked, curious rather than accusatory. Michael nodded. "I gave him a position at my company, against my better judgment. But I set conditions: no direct reports, mandatory leadership training, and regular check-ins with our HR director. He met my gaze directly. Your stand against him inspired me to set boundaries I should have established years ago. I hadn't expected this conversation, hadn't considered that my actions might ripple outward to affect Harold's personal relationships. Is he changing? I asked, not sure why I cared, but finding that I did. Michael's expression was complex, part skepticism, part hope. Inch by inch, perhaps. The loss of status hit him hard. For the first time, he's having to earn respect, rather than demand it. He shrugged. I don't know if people like Harold truly change, but they can learn to behave better when their usual tactics stop working. As we parted ways, Michael hesitated before saying, he doesn't know I'm meeting you, and I won't tell him. But I wanted you to know that what you did mattered beyond what you can see. Standing up to a bully doesn't just free you, it can free everyone in their orbit. I walked back to my office, reflecting on Michael's words. I hadn't left that empty table to teach Harold a lesson or to spark a company-wide revolution. I'd done it to reclaim my worth, to choose myself when no one else would. The wider impact was unexpected but affirming, a reminder that our actions often create ripples we can't anticipate. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sun set over Biscayne Bay, feeling a sense of completion I hadn't realized I was seeking. The empty table that had once represented my rebellion now symbolized something greater, the space I'd created for growth, for integrity, for a life aligned with my true value. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that walking away had never been about escaping Harold Bennett. It had been about finding Natalie Harper. 1 year after my dramatic exit from Bennett Capital, I found myself back in Dallas. It wasn't a return born of necessity or regret, but a deliberate choice to face the place I'd fled. Miami had become home. My position at Meridian had evolved to include oversight of our expansion into sustainable investments. I'd made true friends who valued me professionally and personally, and I'd even begun dating James, a kind and brilliant architect I'd met through Elena. But when Meridian decided to open a Dallas satellite office and Robert asked if I'd consider heading the launch, I surprised myself by saying yes. Are you sure? He'd asked, studying my expression. We can send someone else. I'm sure, I'd replied with more confidence than I felt. It makes sense. I know the market, the players, the culture, and I've got unfinished business there. The unfinished business wasn't Harold. He was firmly in my past. It was something more personal, proving to myself that I could return to Dallas on my own terms, not as someone escaping, but as someone who had succeeded. On a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year and 10 months from the day I'd left an empty table behind I stepped into the lobby of the Meridian Tower in downtown Dallas. The space had been transformed from the generic office suite it once was into a sleek, modern environment that reflected our Miami aesthetic. Open workspaces, glass-walled conference rooms, and stunning views of the city skyline. Ashley was waiting for me, having taken the day off from her directorship at the restructured Bennett Capital to help me settle in. "Look at you," she said, embracing me warmly. "The conquering hero returns?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Hardly heroic, just doing my job." "Your job as regional director," she reminded me, emphasizing the title. "Overseeing a major market expansion, at 31, after being told for years you weren't ready for advancement." She had a point, though I was still getting used to seeing my journey as remarkable rather than simply necessary. The day passed in a whirlwind of meetings, office setup, and reconnecting with Dallas colleagues I hadn't seen since my departure. Word had spread about my return, and I received several invitations to coffee or lunch from former contacts curious about my new role. That evening, Ashley insisted on taking me to dinner at La Paloma, an upscale restaurant that had opened during my absence. "It's the new power spot," she explained as we were seated at a prime table overlooking the city lights. "Everyone who's anyone in Dallas business dines here." I suspected her choice wasn't accidental, and midway through our appetizers, I understood why. At a table across the room sat Harold Bennett, dining with what appeared to be clients. He hadn't noticed us yet, engrossed in what looked like an intense sales pitch. "Did you know he'd be here?" I asked Ashley, keeping my voice low. She had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "I may have heard through the grapevine that he was bringing prospects here tonight." She searched my face. "Are you angry?" I considered the question, then surprised myself by laughing softly. "Not at all. It's perfect, actually." Harold looked different. Older, less polished, with a slightly desperate energy I recognized from struggling salespeople. According to Ashley, his position at his brother's company hadn't lasted. He was now working for a small investment firm with a fraction of Bennett Capital's prestige. He's still trying to climb back, Ashley murmured. But his reputation took a hit he can't seem to recover from. I nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor sympathy, just a calm acceptance that some consequences are earned rather than imposed. Eventually, the inevitable happened. As Harold escorted his clients to the exit, his path took him directly past our table. His step faltered as recognition dawned, his eyes widening in a mixture of shock and, something that might have been shame. I met his gaze steadily, neither flinching nor gloating. After a moment's hesitation, I offered a small, professional nod, the kind one would give a distant acquaintance or former colleague of no particular significance. His face flushed, and for a second I thought he might stop to speak. Instead, he returned the nod stiffly and continued toward the door, his shoulders visibly tense. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Ashley remarked after he'd gone. "I was half expecting a dramatic confrontation." I smiled, taking a sip of my wine. The most powerful statement is sometimes no statement at all. And it was true. Seeing Harold again had confirmed what I'd already learned in Miami. He no longer had any power over me. Not my emotions, not my career, not my sense of worth. He was just a man who'd made poor choices and was living with the results. The following week, I threw myself into establishing Meridian's presence in Dallas. We hired local talent, courted regional investors, and positioned ourselves as a progressive alternative to traditional investment firms. The sustainable energy portfolio I developed with Bennett Capital became our flagship, attracting attention from companies looking to diversify their investments. One morning in late October, as I was reviewing quarterly projections, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "Thomas Davidson is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important." I was surprised but intrigued. "Send him in." Davidson entered my office with the same dignified bearing I remembered, though he seemed more relaxed than during our previous interactions. "Natalie," he greeted me warmly. "Thank you for seeing me without notice. I heard you were back in Dallas and wanted to welcome you personally." After exchanging pleasantries, he came to the point of his visit. "I'm retiring next month," he announced. "After 40 years in finance, it's time to focus on my grandchildren and my golf game." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "Bennett Capital won't be the same without you." He smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "That's actually why I'm here. The board is looking for new blood, someone with vision, integrity, and proven leadership skills." I raised my eyebrows, suddenly understanding where this conversation was heading. "I'm flattered, Thomas, but I'm committed to Meridian. We're building something significant here." He nodded, unsurprised by my response. I expected that, but I wouldn't be doing my duty to Bennett Capital if I didn't at least ask. He leaned forward slightly. "What if we discussed a merger instead?" The proposal was unexpected, but intriguing. Davidson outlined a vision where Meridian would acquire Bennett Capital, retaining key talent while implementing Meridian's more progressive management structure and investment strategies. "The board is unanimous," he explained. "Your work with our sustainable energy portfolio demonstrated what's possible when old and new approaches combine effectively. We believe Meridian's philosophy under your leadership represents the future of investment banking." "I'd need to discuss this with Robert and our executive team," I said, careful not to show how compelling I found the idea. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He rose to leave, then paused. "You know, when you left that empty table behind, many of us thought it was just a dramatic exit. Now I see it was actually a powerful statement about valuing yourself when others wouldn't." He smiled warmly. "I'm glad it brought you here, even if by a roundabout path." After he left, I sat at my desk, considering the strange symmetry of the situation. 2 years ago, I'd been fighting for recognition at Bennett Capital, watching Harold take credit for my ideas while being treated as just staff. Now, Bennett Capital was seeking to be acquired by a company where I held a leadership position, specifically citing my vision and integrity as key factors. Life rarely offers such perfect full-circle moments. I didn't know if the merger would happen. There were countless details to negotiate, teams to consider, cultures to integrate. But the mere fact of the offer felt like the closing of a significant chapter in my professional story. That evening, I called James in Miami to share the news. "It's poetic," he said after I'd explained the situation. "Like the universe conspired to prove your worth in the most dramatic way possible." I laughed, still processing the irony myself. "I don't think the universe cares about my career trajectory." "Maybe not," he conceded. But you cared enough to demand better for yourself. That's what changed everything. He was right, of course. The empty table I'd left behind had never been about punishing Harold or even about the Christmas dinner itself. It had been my declaration that I deserved more than diminishment, more than conditional respect, more than settling for less than my true value. In the weeks that followed, discussions about the potential merger progressed rapidly. Robert flew to Dallas for key meetings, bringing our legal and financial teams to evaluate the proposition. The more we examined Bennett Capital's restructured operations, the more sense an acquisition made from a business perspective. 2 months later, we announced the merger publicly. The financial press called it a strategic consolidation of complementary strengths. But those of us involved knew it represented something more profound, a shift in how the industry viewed leadership, talent development, and organizational culture. On the day we signed the final papers, Ashley texted me, "From being ordered to serve dinner to running the company. If that's not a glow-up, I don't know what is." I smiled at her message, appreciating her loyalty and friendship through every phase of this journey. She'd been promoted again in the restructuring, becoming our chief marketing officer for the combined entity. That evening, I hosted a small gathering at my new Dallas home, a modern loft downtown with views of the city I'd once fled and now helped shape. James had flown in for the occasion, as had Robert, Elena, and other Miami colleagues who'd become friends. They mingled easily with Ashley and my Dallas team, creating a blend of my past and present. That felt unexpectedly harmonious. As conversations flowed around me, I stepped onto my balcony for a moment alone. The Dallas skyline glittered against the night sky, beautiful and familiar, yet somehow new. I'd returned not as the person who'd left in hurt and anger, but as someone who'd discovered her worth and was no longer afraid to claim it. James joined me, slipping an arm around my waist. "Penny for your thoughts?" I leaned against him, grateful for his steady presence. "I was just thinking about that empty table, about how sometimes what looks like an ending is actually a beginning." He nodded, understanding as he always did. "You know what's remarkable about your story? You never set out to prove Harold wrong or to get revenge. You just decided to value yourself when he wouldn't. And everything else followed from that," I finished, seeing the truth in his words. Inside, I could hear laughter and conversation, the sound of connections forming, of possibilities unfolding. My life had expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined that Christmas Eve 2 years ago, not because I'd orchestrated some elaborate plan, but simply because I'd refused to settle for less than I deserved. The empty table that had once symbolized my rejection of Harold's diminishment now represented something far more significant, the space I'd created for a life of authenticity, respect, and true value. As James and I rejoined our guests, I carried that knowledge with me, that sometimes the most powerful choice we can make is not what we pursue, but what we refuse to accept. And in that refusal, quiet but absolute, we create room for everything we truly deserve.